Welcome to Crosstalk Solutions. My name's Chris, and in this video, we're going to be taking a look at the brand new Synology DS1520 Plus, and this thing is a beast. All right, so if you're looking for like a mid-range NAS that's going to be able to run applications super fast, this is one of the ones that you want to take a look at. It's got plenty of storage space with 5 full bays that can handle either 3.5-inch SATA, 2.5-inch SATA, or 2.5-inch SSDs. It also has 2 M.2 NVMe caching drives that you can put into this thing. So that's pretty awesome. So let's go ahead and talk about this device as I get it unboxed. I have a Synology NAS right now. It's the DS218, and it's only 2 drives. I'm running out of space on it, so I felt it was time for an upgrade. The one that I have also does not have the ability to have the M.2 caching, so it's going to be interesting to see how much performance that adds to the NAS. Now, if you're going to be just using a NAS for backing up files, then you probably don't need the versions that come with the M.2 NVMe capability. Just the regular hard drive NASs are going to be fine in that case. But if you're looking to run applications, right, Docker or virtual machines or Plex or whatever, having the M.2 caching drives is a huge benefit in terms of speed of your applications, because anything that you're accessing frequently is going to be cached on those caching hard drives, and then the slower storage of the SATA drives is just for storage. All right, we don't need this box. All right, so inside the box, besides the NAS itself, we've got, looks like they threw in they threw in 2 Cat5 cables. Now, this has 4 gigabit Ethernet ports that can be link aggregated. So we're gonna set up the link aggregation. I don't know if I'll do that in this video or in a separate video, but we're definitely gonna set up link aggregation with my UniFi switch. Looks like you get a couple of keys to lock the thing up, screws for the hard drives, a power brick, and then a standard power cable. Now, I will say that Synology did send me this unit for free. So the DS1520 is actually about $650. I'll have a link down below to all of the stuff that I'm using in this video if you guys want to check it out. So while they did send this to me for free, oh my gosh, so beautiful, look at that. I actually bought all the drives. So I ended up spending way more in hard drives than the cost of the Synology NAS. The drives that I'm going to use here, I have 3 of the 8 terabyte Seagate Iron Wolf drives. Where's my knife? And then I have 2 drives in my old NAS already. So what I'm going to do, since this is a 5-bay system, I'm going to start with 3 drives. And then once I migrate over to it, I'm going to pull the drives out of the old Synology NAS and then add them and expand the storage in this one here. As far as the NVMe goes, I went with the Samsung 970 EVO NVMe M.2. So the hard drives that I purchased, the 8 terabyte Iron Wolves, are $215. I got 3 of those, and then we have the Samsung 970 EVO at $90, and the cost of the Synology NAS itself is $650. So for this setup that I'm initially setting up with just 3 drives and just 1 of the caching drives, you can do 2, but I'm just doing 1 to start, that total setup is $1,384 to get going with this particular solution. If you wanted to fully deck it out with 8 terabyte drives and 2 of the NVMEs, you're gonna add about $530 to that price. So you're getting up to about $2 grand to fully deck this thing out. Oh, look at it. So cute, look at that NVMe. All right, so before we install the drives, let's take a look around the Synology chassis. It has your 5 drive bays up front, and you might look at Synology's lineup and say, gosh, I don't even know which one of these to buy. We're gonna actually cover that in this video. I'm gonna look at all of the different models for sort of home users and IT enthusiasts, and I will basically explain some of the differences between the different Synology models. So you've got your hot swappable drives up front. These are 5 of these drives, or 5 of the hot swappable drive bays, and these can each have a 3.5-inch SATA drive like these Iron Wolves, a 2.5-inch SATA drive, or a 2.5-inch SSD. It will take any of those. We also have a USB 3.0 port on the front, as well as the power button. On the back, we have a Kensington lock. We have a reset hole to factory reset the device. We have another USB 3. We have two eSATA drives, and then we have our 4 gigabit switches. So if you want the 10 gigabit version, you're gonna have to upgrade. Like the next one up has also a PCIe slot that you can put a 10 gig card into. Again, we'll cover that a little bit later in this video. So here's your 4 gigabit ports. I'm gonna link aggregate these ports and see how well that works. That should be plenty of speed for what I need to do with this device. All right, so not much to it. Let's go ahead and get our drives installed. Oh, also on the bottom, this is where you put in your NVMEs. You got your 2 NVMe slots right here on the bottom. All right, so here we see our 2 NVMe slots. We got one labeled 1 and one labeled 2. We're gonna use the slot 1 here. So let's go ahead and take our NVMe and pop it right in. And then it clicks into place just like that. For the drive bays themselves, basically your hard drives just pop right in like so. And you're good to go. You can just install them just like this. There we go, and that's installed. And so they're labeled down here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, drives are in, power's in. I have only plugged in one of the network ports at this point. I will set up the link aggregation later. These keys, by the way, are for the front of these drive bays if you want to lock them in. So we're open right now, but you could turn the key and now the drive bays are locked. For me personally, I will leave these unlocked because I know myself and I will probably lose these keys, and we don't want to do that. Okay, so let's go ahead and fire it up for the first time. And then let's go through the initial setup of this Synology NAS. Synology NAS is installed, plugged in, up and running. I'm actually using this red cable you see right here to connect to it over from my UniFi switch. And if we look at my desktop, we can see that if you go to find.synology.com, it has successfully found my NAS. So let's go ahead and say connect. Agree to the license agreement. Continue on the privacy statement. And here we go. So welcome. Set up your Synology DS1520 now. We're going to click Setup. Install Disk Station Manager. Yes, we want to go ahead and do that. Install. All data on your hard disk will be removed. Yes, that's fine. They are brand new drives. Of course, if you're not using brand new drives and you want to save the data, make sure you back everything up first before you run through this step. And it says your Synology NAS will be ready in approximately 10 minutes. Please do not turn off the power. So we're going to let this run and then come back once it has successfully installed the Disk Station software. Operating system is installed. It's now time to go through the initial setup wizard. So for our server name, we're just going to call this Big NAS. And then we got to give ourselves a username and password. Next, we want to set up Quick Connect. This is in case you want to connect to your Synology NAS from the outside world. In my case, I'm just going to go ahead and skip this step. I'm only going to be accessing it on my local LAN. And that's it. Now we're going to take a guided tour of the Disk Station Manager. All right, so smart update for now on. Once a new DSM update is ready, your Synology NAS will automatically check if the update patch addresses any issues in your current DSM configuration and services in use, and accordingly determine whether to notify you of such update. Okay, that's interesting. Got it. Device analytics. Synology needs your help. No thanks. All right, tip 1, access all built-in and installed packages from the main menu. Got it. Discover more applications at the package center. More settings are available at the control panel. And there we go, we are up and running. Now, I'm not gonna go over the full Synology setup. If you guys are interested in seeing that, go check out my Getting Started with Synology video. I will also put a link to that on the screen here right now. And yeah, that will walk you through the entire sort of best practice setup of a Synology NAS, the initial setup of your NAS. All right, I have covered a lot of ground and done a lot of configuration on this Synology DS1520 Plus since yesterday. Let's take a look at what I've done. The first real simple change that I make to any Synology NAS is I add the storage widget on the desktop. So we have System Health and Resource Monitor by default. If you want to add additional widgets, including storage, which I think is important considering that it's a NAS, you just have to hit the plus button up here, and you can see all of these different widget choices. Basically, just check the box for storage, and then you can sort of drag and drop to rearrange everything. Now let's take a look at our hard drive configuration. I'm going to go to the storage manager. And here we can see volume 1 is healthy. I have about 14 terabytes of available space, of which so far I've only used 1.3 terabytes. I had started a backup job, but I just killed it right before this video so that I could record the video and not have it actually backing up while I was recording. I will restart that backup job once this video is done. We can see down here at the bottom that I have 3 used drives and 2 available slots. Again, I'm going to migrate the hard drives from my old NAS into this one as the 4th and 5th slot after this video is recorded. And if we click on volume, we can see here that we have a healthy volume. Everything is looking good. One interesting thing that I ran into that I was not aware of when I purchased all the drives for this, this new Synology NAS, you can see here that I have my cache device, right? And it is healthy. Now if I click on SSD cache down here, we can see that the cache drive is installed and the cache drive is working. However, you remember there were 2 spots for M.2 NVMe drives in the Synology NAS. Well, as it turns out, if you only put 1 NVMe in, that's going to be a read cache only, right? So read cache only. If you put 2 NVMe's in, you get 1 is a read cache and the second one is a write cache. Okay, so I didn't know that that's how it worked. I thought that maybe they were just going to be, you know, RAID 1 mirrored, or perhaps it was just to expand the total amount of space in like a RAID 0 type of configuration between the 2 NVMe's. No, that actually is not how it works. It is one of them, the first one that you put in by default is read cache only. And then if you add a second one, you get a read cache and a write cache. So keep that in mind if you're going to be, I mean, really a lot of it depends on what you're running on the NAS and whether you're doing a lot of writing or whether you're doing a lot of reading. But if you want to fully deck this thing out, make sure you put 2 of the M.2 NVMe drives into the Synology NAS. So one of the next things I did was I set up the Link Aggregation. Well, I set up a static IP address first, and then I set up Link Aggregation. So if we come over here to the control panel, we see network right here. So let's click on network. And if we click on network interface, we can see LAN 1. They are all 4 connected right now, but I actually had the Link Aggregation set up, and then I disabled it so that I could redo it and show you guys how it's done. LAN 1 here is set to use DHCP no. So if you click edit, right, you can basically set, do you want it to be DHCP, or do you want to use a manual configuration, a static IP address, in which case I had set up a static IP address of 192.168.200.11. So we're going to say OK, but let's go ahead and set up Link Aggregation. So in order to do that, we need to do create bond right here. So we're doing a bond across the 4 interfaces. You can actually choose how many interfaces you want to bond. In my case, I'm going to go ahead and do all 4, right? So I want to choose next IEEE 802.3 AD Dynamic Link Aggregation, because the switch that I'm using, which is a Gen2 UniFi 24-port switch, does support 802.3 AD link aggregation on the other side, okay? So we're going to set that up in 1 second. So we're going to say next, then we're going to select all 4 of the LAN interfaces and click next once again. Here's where we can again set a static IP address or choose to set it up with DHCP. I'm going to keep the same static IP address of 192.168.200.11. And in fact, I'm going to run a command prompt here, and I'm going to ping that address so that we can watch as the link aggregation takes place. So we're going to go ahead and first click apply. And yes. And now we can see in the background here, it says applying network settings. Now that's going to take a little while. Notice also that my ping had a little bit of a blip there, right? But it should actually still be okay even once all of the network settings are applied. So let's wait for this to go all the way through, keeping in mind that I have not done anything on the switch yet, right? I have only done this on the NAS side of the link aggregated set of 4 bonded interfaces. All right, so the screen refreshed. Notice that the ping is still running just fine. Let's go ahead and click on our network interface now. And what we have is, instead of 4 separate LAN interfaces showing up under network interface, we have a single bonded network interface. And the NAS is still working just fine. I'm still getting replies from the ping. But look down here. Failed to establish IEEE 802.3 AD connection. And why is that? That's because we haven't set up the switch side link aggregation yet. So let's do that next. I'm going to pop over to UniFi. And in UniFi, I'm going to click on Devices, and then we're going to click on My Switch. Over here on the switch, we're going to click on Ports, and then I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to do the link aggregation across ports 17, 18, 19, and 20. You can see they are already plugged in because I do have all 4 cables connected across to the Synology NAS, but we're just going to edit port 17, which is the first interface on the switch in the sort of set of 4 bonded interfaces. We're going to come down here to Profile Overrides, and then we're going to set this to Aggregate. And then the aggregate ports, it still has my setting from when I had it set up previously, 17 through 20. So ports 17, 18, 19, and 20. We're going to click Apply. And now this switch will go into provisioning status. And then once it comes back from provisioning status, let's go back into the Synology NAS and see if we have an update. There we go, connected. Let's go back to the Synology NAS and give it just a second. There we go. So it just switched over. So network status went from 1 gigabit to 4 gigabits. And so it says 4,000 megabits per second, full duplex. Link aggregation is now working, and when I was running backups from my computer here at my desk over to the Synology NAS, boy, it was flying. I mean, it was pushing, very close to 1 gigabit, which is the network interface of my PC, right? So when I was backing my documents, for instance, over to the Synology NAS, I was getting basically like full wire speed because there is no bottleneck at the Synology NAS itself. And again, they do have versions of Synology NAS with, 10 gig, or at least with 10 gig capability through a PCIe card. This is not that one. I don't need 10 gig in my own home network. Maybe someday I will. Right now I don't. But if you do need 10 gig, we're going to go over some of the other models of Synology NAS a little bit later in this video. All right, moving on, let's take a look at some of the other things that I initially set up. One of the very cool things that I set up is active backup for G Suite. So essentially, I went through, I set up, I connected using, APIs and going into the Google admin developer section. Basically, you have to set up a bunch of stuff. They have a nice little tutorial on how to do it, where you can connect your G Suite over to the Synology NAS, over to active backup for G Suite. They have the same thing for Office 365. But essentially, if we look at my task list here, we can see backup is successful. That means that I now have a full backup of my email, my G Suite email, Drive, so all of my shared documents and whatnot, as well as, Calendar and other G Suite applications, all backed up into the Synology NAS. So if for some reason the Google Cloud is not available, or if I'm offline or who knows what, I still have a good copy of all of my sort of shared in the cloud Google Docs documents as well as emails. So I'm not going to say that that was super easy to set up, but I will say that they did have a full list of instructions that was just, following those instructions. And even though it was kind of complicated, I don't understand exactly everything that I'm doing in those instructions, it was just step by step and it worked perfectly fine first try. I also went in here to the file station and I created a new folder for backups. So I have a backups, from my desktop, from my laptop. Those will back up into a backups directory, and I just use scripts for that. I don't use like Windows backup or anything like that. I just use scripts. It's actually robocopy scripts. And that's pretty old school. You could use Windows backup if you wanted to. In fact, my getting started with Synology NAS video, I used the Windows backup, the built-in Windows backup to do those copies. In my case, though, I just want to copy all the files, right? I just want to have everything copied, and I want to have it set as a scheduled task that runs every single night, and that's what I've set up here. It hasn't completed yet, but so far, if we look at my storage capacity, I have 1.26 terabytes. I think I have just under 4 terabytes of total data that will eventually make it over to this NAS. All right, the next thing that I did was I installed Surveillance Station, and while I don't actually use Surveillance Station, I did install it because I had additional licenses on my old Synology NAS. So I had like, Surveillance Station comes with licenses for 2 cameras by default, and then you can purchase additional licenses for additional cameras. I had a 4 license pack in addition to the 2 included licenses on my old Synology NAS. So I wanted to transfer that over to this one, and that was pretty easy. I just had to log into the old Synology NAS. You come in here to license, and so here we can see the default license with 2 license for 2 cameras, and then I have this other license which is for 4 cameras. You can just basically do show license key, copy the license, then you can just delete it out of the old one, and then just re-add it to the new one, and that's it, you're done. So I was successfully able to migrate my license. Even though I don't actually use Synology Station, I'd like to do some testing with it, and I want to make sure that I grab that license off the old Synology NAS before I decommission it. Okay, and the last thing that I did here was I installed Docker, and then I set up a Pi-hole container. I actually will probably end up redoing this though. Let me show you what I did here. So if we come in here to Pi-hole, details, we can see my container, but I originally set it up as bridge mode. So when you set it up in bridge mode, essentially what you're doing is you're saying, we're gonna create a separate network within the Synology NAS itself, right? So sort of on the back side of the Synology NAS, the network that it sets up by default is a 172.17/16 subnet, and so it set that up originally. I really should have instead though just put the Pi-hole on my main LAN instead. I mean, you can argue either way, right? It's a little bit easier just to put it on your main LAN. That way it gets an IP address from DHCP just like any other server would. Since it's in bridge mode, I had to put a specific static route in my pfSense firewall. In fact, let me show that to you. Okay, so in pfSense, I went to System and then Routing, and then I had to set up a gateway first, so I set up the interface of the Synology NAS as a separate gateway, and then I came over here to Static Routes, and I added a new static route that basically just says anything that is 172.17/16, send it through that gateway. So this way traffic knows if on my LAN there's something that's searching for 172.17.x.x, right, .anything, go through the IP interface of the Synology NAS to get to that network. And so once I set up that static route, the Pi-hole started working just fine. But when it comes to ease of network administration, it's probably better just to have the Pi-hole right on my standard LAN. So I will probably actually delete that Docker container and then recreate it. But I'll pull up the interface here, and you can see that it is working just fine at 172.17.0.2. And this part right here is where I had changed to a, you see there's no queries in between this like 2-hour section here. It's because I had changed the IP address of the Synology NAS, and I forgot to re-update the gateway for the static route in pfSense, and so it was kind of like down for a couple hours until I realized, oh, I forgot, I have to update that gateway. And then I went through and did that, and then it started working fine once again. So Docker on the Synology NAS is really easy. It's really simple to set up and use. I absolutely love it. I only have Pi-hole on here now, but you could do UniFi, you could do database servers, you could do Grafana, you could do, I mean, literally anything that you want, you can find a Docker container for. And yeah, Docker works great. So The only other thing that I'll probably do on this Synology NAS is install Plex. I like to use it as a Plex server for, you know, backed up movies and stuff like that. And that's about it. Last step is going to be basically to rewire the Synology NAS down here below my printer where my current Synology NAS is, and then of course take the 2 drives out of my old Synology NAS and pop them into the new one. And then we can basically call this project complete. So last thing in this video, let's take a look at the Synology NAS lineup and help you guys choose which would be the right Synology NAS for you. All right, so here I am at Synology.com. I went to products and then I chose IT Enthusiast, and that shows a lot of the sort of higher end home user Synology NAS solutions. This one here, the DS220 Plus, is sort of the newer version of the one that I have. I have the DS218 Plus. So that's a really good starter NAS for if you just want backups. Okay, so if you look through sort of the bullet points here, you've got the first 2 here. You've got the Slim and then the DS220 Plus. Neither of these have the ability to do the M.2 NVMe caching drives, which means that they're mostly for if you're only using them to back up files, right? If you're not looking to run Docker and Plex and other applications, you know, surveillance station or whatever, on the devices itself, then these are probably the ones that you want. Not to say that you can't run Surveillance Station or Plex or Docker on these devices. You certainly can, but the performance will be much better if you're going to be utilizing those applications heavily if you jump up to the Synology NAS solutions that have those M.2 NVMe SSD cache support. So the 420 Plus has the SSD cache. It also has 4 drives, but it's basically not really expandable. You have the 2 caching drives. You have 4 drive bays for storage. This is a really great, like, entry-level performance Synology NAS. And when I say performance, I mean that it has those caching drives. What you don't get with this is the expandability, right? So let me pop back one. So look at this one. This one says scales up to 7 drives. The one that I have is this one here, the 1520, scales up to 15 drives. So that means that you can add on this expansion here. So the DX517 is a 5-bay expansion. And what you can do with like the 720 is start off with the Synology NAS that has 2 drives and then add the 5-drive expansion later on if you need more space. So it's kind of upgradable with an expandable chassis, which I think is awesome. This one you can only add 1 expandable chassis with 5 extra drives. The 920, you can only add 1 additional expandable chassis. The one that I have, you can add 2, right? So I have 5 drives. I can add another 5 and then another 5 to get it up to a total of 15 drives. Hence the model number, the DS1520 Plus. Same thing with the DS16. It's basically exactly the same. It's a little bit of an older model, 6 bays. It can have 2 of the expanded drive bays, these DX517s. But it has a little bit of an older CPU. So you see that's a quad core at 2.1 gigahertz. The newer ones are the quad core Celeron at 2.7 gigahertz. And then you start getting into the, you know, the very large bays. So you've got the 18, 19 plus. Again, older generation CPU, but plenty of storage and still a really great NAS solution. Same thing with the DS2419 plus. So the way that I would break it down is like this. If you just want a Synology NAS for backing up your data, and you're not really going to take advantage of all of the other things that the Synology NAS provides for you, then depending on your amount of data, go for the 220 Plus or this 620 Slim. Or even you can bump up to the DS420, but don't actually put the NVMe drives into it. You don't need the caching drives if you're just using it for storage of files. If you're going to be storing files, but also using this as some level of application server, then you're going to want to jump up to one of these other models. I would probably recommend, you know, the 420 Plus as a good starter NAS, or the 720 Plus. Again, depends on your storage requirements and how much space you actually have to back up. Of course, budget is also always a consideration. But this one here, the 5-bay unit with the 2 caching drive capability, is a really, really good mid-range home NAS, an IT enthusiast NAS. And man, you can do so much with it. Like I said, I'm just scratching the surface of what you can actually do. If we come over here to the package center, this top section are all of just the Synology packages that you can install. You know, an email server, iTunes server, you know, photo station, etc., etc., etc. All of these applications, and then you scroll down even further and you get the third-party applications. This can be a Git server, it can be a web server, you know, a wiki. You know, there's just so much that you can do with it and install right onto this device. WordPress, Plex, everything, right? You can do so much with this. Really, the sky's the limit when it comes to these Synology NAS. I like the Synology solutions a lot. I've been running the small DS218 Plus for, I think, close to 3 years now. I've never had a problem with it. I've never had, you know, knock on wood, I've never had a single problem with the Synology NAS, and so I'm really happy with the solution, but it was starting to get close to running out on space, so now I've got this sort of mid-range Big Daddy NAS here that I'm sure will last me for another 3 years or more. All right, that's it for this video on Synology NAS. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, make sure you give me a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please click subscribe. My name's Chris with Crosstalk Solutions, and thank you so much for watching. Don't need this. All right, we don't need this box.